I am Cassie, 32 years old, and I just returned from an important business trip to find the locks on my dream house changed. Exhausted and confused, I drove to my parents' home where my brother Julian was showing off photos from his lavish Maldives vacation. With a smirk on his face, my dad casually announced, "Your house paid for their fun." The shock hit me like a physical blow, but I only smiled in response. "What's so funny?" he snapped. If you are enjoying this story, please let me know where you are watching from in the comments. Hit that like button and subscribe to follow my journey of betrayal and unexpected revenge. My name is Cassie Thompson, a 32-year-old marketing director who has been self-sufficient since the age of 18. Growing up in a middle-class neighborhood in Portland, I learned early on that I would need to forge my own path. While my parents had the financial means to help with my education, they chose to prioritize my younger brother, Julian. Their reasoning was always the same: he needs more support than you do. You are naturally gifted. This pattern of favoritism was established long before I could understand its implications. During my high school years, I worked 3 jobs simultaneously to save for college. Weekday mornings at a coffee shop, evenings at a local restaurant, and weekends at a retail store. My parents praised my work ethic but never offered financial assistance. Meanwhile, Julian received a brand new car for his 16th birthday and an unlimited allowance that he spent frivolously on video games and parties. Despite the obvious favoritism, I maintained a relationship with my family, holding on to the hope that someday they would recognize my achievements with the same enthusiasm they showed for Julian's smallest accomplishments. This hope, I would later realize, was misplaced. Julian, now 27, has never held a steady job. His resume consists of short-lived positions that he quit because they were beneath him or too stressful. Every failed attempt at independence was met with understanding and financial support from our parents. They paid his rent when he was fired for chronic tardiness. They covered his credit card debt when he overspent on designer clothes. They even financed his brief attempt at starting a podcast about luxury lifestyle, which he abandoned after 3 episodes. My brother grew accustomed to having his problems solved by our parents. He never developed the resilience or responsibility that comes from facing consequences. When his girlfriend of 6 months broke up with him for his immaturity, my parents consoled him as though he had suffered an unimaginable tragedy. After graduating college with honors, I secured an entry-level position at a marketing firm. While my colleagues complained about student loans, I had none, but only because I had worked myself to exhaustion for 4 years, taking maximum course loads to graduate early and save on tuition. The pride I felt in this accomplishment was dampened when my father commented, "You were lucky to find those jobs. Not everyone has your advantages." For 5 years, I lived in a small apartment, saving diligently for a down payment on a house. I brought lunch to work every day, limited my social outings, and tracked every dollar I spent. When I finally had enough saved, I began my search for the perfect home. The house I found was a 2-story craftsman-style home in a quiet neighborhood with mature oak trees lining the street. Built in the 1950s, it had character that modern developments lacked. Wide plank hardwood floors, a brick fireplace, and large windows that filled the rooms with natural light. The backyard was spacious with a small garden that reminded me of the one my grandmother Margaret had lovingly tended. This detail was particularly significant to me. My grandmother had been my sanctuary during childhood. When the favoritism at home became unbearable, I would bike to her house 3 miles away. She would welcome me with freshly baked cookies and unwavering support. "You are stronger than you know, Cassie," she would say. "And one day that strength will be your greatest asset." The house near her old neighborhood felt like a connection to her, even though she had passed away 3 years earlier. When I signed the closing papers, I felt her presence, her approval. This was more than a financial investment. It was a symbol of my independence and resilience. When I invited my family to see my new home, their reactions were predictably dismissive. My mother commented on how much work it would need. My father questioned whether I had overpaid. Julian laughed at the outdated kitchen, though he had never cooked a meal in his life. "Must be nice to be so lucky," he said, as though my years of hard work and sacrifice were irrelevant. For 2 years, I poured love and effort into that house. I painted each room myself, restored the hardwood floors, and planted flowers in the garden that my grandmother would have loved. It became my sanctuary, a physical manifestation of my journey to self-sufficiency. Then came the opportunity that could advance my career significantly. A 2-week business trip to Singapore to pitch our marketing campaign to potential international clients. My boss made it clear that this assignment could lead to a promotion if handled successfully. The timing was not ideal. The trip would overlap with the blooming of the rose bushes I had planted in memory of my grandmother. I arranged for a gardening service, but my mother suggested I leave a key with them instead. "We will check on the house while you are gone," she offered. Against my better judgment, I agreed. The day before my departure, Julian called, his voice carrying the familiar tone of self-pity. His girlfriend of 3 months had broken up with him via text message. "I need to get away," he lamented. "I need time to heal from this betrayal." He spoke about needing a luxury vacation, perhaps. To Bali or the Maldives. Something Instagram-worthy to show his ex what she was missing. When I asked how he planned to afford such an extravagant trip on his meager savings, he sighed dramatically. "Mom and Dad say they cannot help this time. They claim they are saving for retirement or something. So unfair." A sense of unease crept over me as I handed my house key to my mother that evening. She noticed my hesitation. "Do not worry," she assured me. "We will take good care of everything." I should have listened to my instincts. I should have made other arrangements. But family loyalty and the pressure of my upcoming business trip clouded my judgment. I boarded my flight to Singapore the next morning, unaware that I was leaving my dream home vulnerable to the very people who should have protected it. After 2 grueling weeks of presentations, client meetings, and networking events in Singapore, I was physically and mentally exhausted. The trip had been successful beyond expectations, with our company securing contracts with 3 major Asian corporations, but the constant pressure to perform had taken its toll. All I wanted was to sleep in my own bed in my own house, surrounded by the comfort I had created for myself. My flight landed at Portland International Airport at 8:30 in the evening. Rain pattered against the windows of the taxi as we drove through familiar streets. When the driver pulled up to my house, I noticed that the porch light was off. Strange, since I had programmed it to turn on automatically at sunset. Dragging my suitcase up the front steps, I inserted my key into the lock. It did not turn. Thinking I might be using the wrong key, I tried another. Still nothing. I stepped back and examined the door. The lock had been changed. Confusion and alarm washed over me. Had there been a break-in? Had my parents needed to replace the lock for some reason? I rang the doorbell, thinking perhaps they were inside, but no one answered. The house stood dark and silent. I called my mother's cell phone, but it went straight to voicemail. My father answered on the 3rd ring, his voice unusually cheerful. "Cassie, you are back. How was the trip?" "Dad, I am at my house and my key does not work." Did something happen? A moment of silence followed. Then, "You should come over to our place. We need to talk." The ominous tone in his voice sent a chill through me. I returned to the waiting taxi and directed the driver to my parents' suburban home 15 minutes away. As I entered their living room, the scene before me was surreal. Julian lounged on the sofa, scrolling through photos on his phone with a satisfied smile. My mother busied herself in the kitchen, avoiding eye contact. My father sat in his recliner watching a basketball game with casual interest. "What is going on?" I asked, my voice strained. "Why was my lock changed?" Julian looked up from his phone, his expression smug. "Check these out," he said, turning the screen toward me. The photos showed him lounging on a pristine beach, sipping cocktails by an infinity pool, and posing in front of a luxury water bungalow. Maldives, baby 5-star, all the way. I stared at the images in confusion. "How did you afford this?" I thought. Mom and Dad said they could not help. My father muted the television and leaned forward. "We found another solution," he said, his tone matter of fact. "We sold your house." The words hit me like a physical blow. I felt my knees weaken and I gripped the back of a chair for support. "You, what?" We sold your house, he repeated more firmly this time. Got a good price, too. All cash offer closed in 10 days. My mother finally emerged from the kitchen, wringing her hands. Julian really needed this trip, Cassie. He was devastated after Ashley broke up with him. You know how sensitive he is. I struggled to process what I was hearing. You sold my house without my permission. That is illegal. How did you even do that? My father waved dismissively. We had your key. We had access to your paperwork in your home office. The rest was just details. Details? You mean fraud? My voice rose with incredulity. Julian interjected, showing no remorse. The resort was amazing. Private butler, unlimited spa treatments, underwater restaurant. I needed this, Cassie. You have no idea how hard my breakup was. Rage and disbelief battled within me, but I forced myself to remain outwardly calm. So you committed fraud, sold my house without my knowledge or consent, and used the money for a luxury vacation. My mother's expression turned defensive. Not all of it went to the vacation. We needed a new car, too. And Julian deserved something nice after everything he has been through. Everything he has been through, I echoed, incredulous. A 3-month relationship ending is justification for stealing my house. The house I worked 3 jobs to save for. The house I spent years renovating. My father's face hardened. Do not be so dramatic. You can always buy another house. You are doing well at your job. Besides, we are your parents. We know what is best. What is best? You think stealing from your daughter is what is best. We did not steal, my father said firmly. We redistributed family resources to where they were needed most. Julian needed healing. You were too attached to that house anyway. Too attached? It was my house. My father leaned back in his chair, a smirk forming on his lips. Well, not anymore. Your house paid for their fun. He gestured toward Julian, who was still absorbed in his vacation photos. In that moment, something inside me shifted. The shock and anger gave way to an eerie calm. I felt the corners of my mouth turn upward into a smile. My father's smirk faltered. What is so funny? He snapped. I maintained my smile but said nothing. Instead, I picked up my suitcase and headed toward the door. Where are you going? My mother called after me. To make some calls, I replied, my voice steady. Enjoy your evening. As I closed the door behind me, I could hear Julian asking, what is her problem? She can just buy another house. Little did they know that their actions had set in motion a series of events that would change our family forever, and not in the way they imagined. I drove through the rain-soaked streets, tears blurring my vision until I reached the apartment complex where my best friend Emma lived. Since college, Emma had been my rock, the sister I never had but desperately needed. Her lights were on despite the late hour, and she answered my frantic knocking in pajamas, her face immediately shifting from sleepy confusion to concern. Cassie, what happened? She pulled me inside, taking my rain-drenched coat. I collapsed onto her couch, the enormity of the situation finally breaking through my shock. Between sobs, I explained what my family had done. Emma listened, her expression morphing from disbelief to outrage. They sold your house, without your consent, for a vacation. Her voice rose with each question. That is not just immoral, Cassie. That is criminal. We need to call the police right now. I took a deep breath, regaining some composure. There is something else, Emma. Something about the house that they do not know. Emma sat beside me, her brow furrowed. What do you mean? My mind drifted back to my grandmother Margaret, the one person in my family who had truly seen and valued me. While my parents lavished attention and resources on Julie and Grandma, Margaret had invested in me not with money, but with unwavering belief in my potential. Do you remember my grandmother? I asked. Emma nodded. Of course. She was wonderful. Always had cookies when we visited in high school, and never failed to ask about my art projects. She was the only one who ever put me first, I said softly. The only one who saw how my parents treated me, compared to Julian. In my mind, I could see Grandma Margaret tending her garden, dispensing wisdom along with freshly picked tomatoes. Family should lift you up, Cassie, not tear you down, she would say. Remember that you deserve love that does not come with conditions. 3 years before I bought my house, Grandma Margaret had passed away peacefully in her sleep. What few people knew was that before her death, she had established a private trust with me as the beneficiary. She had been careful to keep this arrangement secret from my father, her son, who had previously borrowed substantial sums from her that were never repaid. The house, I explained to Emma, is not technically mine, at least not in the way they think. Emma looked confused. What do you mean? I am the listed owner, yes, but I am actually the trustee of my grandmother's estate. The house was purchased through a trust she established before she died. Wait, Emma said, trying to process this information. So, the house belongs to a trust, not directly to you. I nodded. Exactly. Grandma knew how my father operated. She knew he had taken advantage of her financially in the past. So she created a trust with very specific conditions. The primary one being that if any family member attempted to misappropriate the trust assets, they would forfeit all inheritance rights. Emma's eyes widened. So by selling your house, they violated the terms of the trust, I confirmed. And there is more. I suspected something like this might happen. My father had been asking too many questions about the house's value before I left. Julian had been too interested in how much equity I had built up. What did you do? Emma asked. I installed security cameras before I left. Hidden ones connected to cloud storage. I have video evidence of them entering my house, going through my papers, meeting with a realtor, and forging my signature on documents. Emma stared at me in amazement. You knew they would try something like this. I sighed heavily. I hoped they would not. But living with them for 18 years taught me to prepare for the worst. My grandmother taught me that too in her own way. She always said, trust should be earned, not automatically given, even to family. Emma reached for her phone. We need to call the police. This is clear fraud. I placed my hand over hers. Not yet. I need to speak with my grandmother's lawyer first. There is a process to this. The trust has specific protocols for handling violations. But Cassie, they sold your house. Where will you live? What about all your belongings? I had been so consumed by the betrayal that I had not fully processed these practical concerns. I do not know, I admitted. I assume they packed up my things, or maybe they are still in the house. The new owners might not have moved in yet. Emma squeezed my hand. You will stay here until we figure this out. And we will figure it out. Your family cannot get away with this. As the initial shock began to subside, a steely determination took its place. My grandmother had protected me even after her death, preparing for a betrayal she must have sensed might come. I would not let her down. Tomorrow, I said, my voice steady for the first time since discovering the truth, I will contact Mr. Harrison, my grandmother's lawyer. He has all the trust documents. And then we will make a plan. Emma nodded, her expression fierce with loyalty. Whatever you need, I am here. Those three have no idea what they have done, do they? No, I replied, a grim smile forming. They think they just sold a house. They do not realize they sold their futures. As I settled into Emma's guest room that night, exhaustion finally overtaking me, I felt my grandmother's presence stronger than ever. I will make this right, Grandma. I whispered into the darkness. I promise. The following morning, I woke with purpose. Despite the jet lag and emotional exhaustion, I was ready to take action. Emma had already left for work, but she had written a note. Called in sick today. Making breakfast. We have war planning to do. Over Emma's homemade pancakes, we outlined our first steps. My priority was meeting with Mr. Harrison, my grandmother's attorney, and the legal administrator of her trust. I called his office as soon as it opened at 9 a.m. Cassie, Mr. Harrison greeted me, his voice warm but concerned. I was about to call you. I received some unusual paperwork regarding property in the trust. Are you selling the house? No, Mr. Harrison, I replied firmly. I am not. But my parents and brother forged my signature and sold it without my knowledge or consent while I was out of the country. His sharp intake of breath told me everything. That is a serious allegation. And unfortunately, it aligns with what I am seeing in these documents. Can you come to my office today? 2 hours later, Emma and I sat across from Mr. Harrison in his downtown office. At 65, with silver hair and penetrating blue eyes, he had the commanding presence of someone who had spent decades in courtrooms. He had been my grandmother's trusted advisor and friend for over 30 years. First, he said, placing a folder on his desk, "Let me assure you that this sale is not valid. As trustee, you are the only person authorized to sell assets in the trust. Any transfer without your legitimate signature is fraudulent." Can we reverse it? I asked. Yes, but it will take time. The innocent purchasers have rights too, and they likely have no idea about the fraud. We will need to involve the police, as forgery is a criminal offense. I nodded, feeling both relief and dread. What about my grandmother's provision regarding family members who try to misappropriate trust assets? Mr. Harrison's expression turned grim. That provision is quite clear. According to the trust documents, any family member who attempts to take or convert trust assets for their own benefit immediately forfeits all rights to any inheritance or benefit from the trust. Based on what you have told me, your parents and brother have triggered this provision. Emma leaned forward. What does that mean exactly? It means Mr. Harrison explained that they are now excluded from any future distributions from the trust. And the trust contains more than just the house. This was news to me. What do you mean? Your grandmother was quite shrewd with her investments. The house was purchased using only a portion of the trust assets. There are additional funds that were to be distributed on your 35th birthday, with smaller portions designated for your parents and brother, provided they respected the terms of the trust. My heart sank. So they have lost their inheritance too, not just stolen my house. I am afraid so, Mr. Harrison confirmed. Your grandmother anticipated something like this might happen. She experienced similar behavior from your father during her lifetime. I remembered my grandmother's warnings about my father's sense of entitlement, how he had borrowed money from her repeatedly, always with excuses for why he could not repay it, how he had once tried to convince her to refinance her home to fund his failed business venture. What do we do now? I asked. Mr. Harrison outlined a comprehensive plan. First, we would file a police report for the forgery and fraud. Then we would contact the title company and the new homeowners to explain the situation. Finally, we would invoke the trust provision and formally document my family's violation. The process will take time, he cautioned, and it will not be pleasant. Are you prepared for that? I thought about my parents' smirking faces, Julian's casual dismissal of my years of hard work. Yes, I replied. I am ready. Our next step was identifying and contacting the buyers of my house. Through Mr. Harrison's connections, we learned they were a young couple, the Millers, who had just relocated to Portland for work. They had been told I was selling quickly due to a job transfer and had never met me personally. All communication had been through my representatives, my parents. With Mr. Harrison present, I called the Millers to explain the situation. Their shock and distress were palpable. We had no idea, Mrs. Miller said, her voice shaking. We thought everything was legitimate. We have already started renovations. This is not your fault, I assured them. You are victims too. My attorney will work with you to make this right. Mr. Harrison explained that they would be compensated for any expenses and inconvenience. The Millers agreed to cooperate with the investigation, providing copies of all documents and communications they had received. Next came the police report. Detective Ramirez listened carefully as I explained the situation, examining the video evidence from my security cameras. The footage clearly showed my father and Julian entering my home office, rifling through my documents, and later meeting with a real estate agent. Another clip captured my mother practicing my signature before finally forging it on the sales documents. This is pretty clear-cut fraud and forgery, Detective Ramirez said. We will need statements from the buyers and the real estate agent involved, but you have strong evidence here. As we left the police station, I received a call from my cousin David, the only relative I remained close to. Cassie, what is going on? Uncle Robert just called Dad in a panic, saying you are trying to have them arrested. I explained the situation to David, who had always seen through my parents' favoritism. I am not surprised, he admitted. But even for them, this is extreme. Do you know they also bought a new car with the money? And Julian has been bragging about his trip all over social media. This new information fueled my resolve. Through David, I learned more about the extent of their betrayal. The house had sold for $420,000. Julian's Maldives trip had cost nearly $70,000, including first-class flights and the overwater bungalow. My parents had purchased a new luxury SUV for $60,000. The remaining funds were in a joint account they had opened, already being spent on various indulgences. There is something else you should know, David added hesitantly. This is not the first time they have tried to access your grandmother's money. About a year after she died, Uncle Robert approached my dad about contesting her will. He was convinced there was more money somewhere that you were hiding. This revelation, while painful, did not surprise me. It only confirmed what I already knew about my family's character and reinforced my determination to hold them accountable. Over the next few days, Emma and I meticulously documented everything. We compiled financial records, trust documents, video evidence, and statements from the Millers and others involved in the fraudulent sale. Mr. Harrison prepared legal notices formally invoking the trust provisions that disinherited my family members. We should deliver these in person, I decided. I want to see their faces when they realize what they have done. Emma squeezed my hand. Are you sure? It will be ugly. I am sure, I replied. But I do not want to do it at their house, where they have the home field advantage. I want neutral territory with witnesses. After some discussion, we decided on a family gathering. I would invite my parents and Julian, along with other extended family members, to a dinner at a private room in a local restaurant. There, with relatives as witnesses, I would reveal the truth and present the legal consequences of their actions. David helped arrange the gathering, telling my parents I wanted to clear the air about recent events. They agreed readily, perhaps thinking I had accepted their betrayal or even that I might apologize for my overreaction. The night before the confrontation, I sat alone in Emma's guest room looking at an old photo of my grandmother and me in her garden. I wish you were here, I whispered. But in a way you still are. You prepared for this, didn't you? You knew they might try something like this. In the photo, my grandmother's eyes twinkled with the wisdom of someone who had seen through pretenses and still chose kindness when possible, but boundaries when necessary. I would need both kindness and boundaries tomorrow. I will make you proud, I promised the photo. Not with revenge, but with justice. The private dining room at Riverside Restaurant was elegant without being ostentatious, with large windows overlooking the Willamette River. I had arrived early with Emma and David to ensure everything was in place. Mr. Harrison would arrive shortly before the scheduled confrontation, along with Detective Ramirez, who had agreed to be present in an unofficial capacity. Family members began arriving at 6:30 p.m. My aunt, Elaine, and Uncle Thomas. My father's sister and her husband. Cousin Patricia and her husband Mark. My mother's brother Samuel and his wife Catherine. All people who had witnessed the dynamic of our family for years, who had seen the preferential treatment Julian received but had never intervened. My parents and Julian arrived last 15 minutes late. My mother looked nervous, fidgeting with her new designer handbag, likely purchased with my house money. My father appeared confident, even smug, as though this dinner was a formality before I accepted the new reality. Julian was engrossed in his phone, probably still posting photos from his ill-gotten vacation. Cassie, my father, greeted me with forced joviality. Good to see you have calmed down. Family dinner is a nice idea. I maintained a neutral expression. Thank you all for coming. Please let us eat first. We can talk after dinner. Throughout the meal, conversation remained superficial. Whether local sports teams, an upcoming family wedding, My parents seemed to relax as the dinner progressed, without incident. Julian even boasted about his trip, describing the underwater restaurant and private butler service in detail, oblivious to the inappropriateness of flaunting his stolen luxury. The snorkeling was incredible, he enthused. You could see manta rays right from the deck of my water villa. Worth every penny. Every penny of my money, I thought, but said nothing. As dessert was served, Mr. Harrison arrived, followed by Detective Ramirez. I introduced them simply as my guests, watching my father's expression shift from confusion to wariness. Before we continue, I said, standing to address the gathered family, I would like to explain why I invited you all here tonight. The room quieted, all eyes turning to me. As some of you know, while I was in Singapore on business, my house was sold without my knowledge or consent. The proceeds were used to fund Julian's vacation to the Maldives, a new car for my parents, and various other purchases. My father interrupted, his voice sharp. Cassie, this is hardly the place to air family disagreements. We have discussed this already. No, Dad, we have not discussed it. You informed me of what you had done. There was no discussion. I turned to address the wider family. What you may not know is how this sale was accomplished. I have evidence I would like to share. Before my father could object further, I nodded to Emma, who connected her laptop to the room's projector. The screen lit up with footage from my hidden security cameras. The first clip showed my father and Julian entering my home office, searching through my desk drawers until they found my financial documents. Here it is, my father said in the video. The house is worth at least $400,000, more than enough for what we need. Julian's recorded voice was eager. Can we really do this? Will it work? My father's response was chilling. Trust me. She will never know until it is too late. And by then, what can she do? The next clip showed my mother at my dining room table practicing my signature repeatedly on a notepad, then finally signing my name on official-looking documents. My father stood over her shoulder, directing, "Make the C more looped." She does that thing with the final E. The room had gone completely silent. My relatives watched in shocked disbelief. My mother's face had drained of color. My father's jaw was clenched tight. "Turn that off," he demanded. "This is private family business. Fraud is not private, Dad. It is criminal." I gestured to Detective Ramirez. "This is Detective Ramirez from the Portland Police Department. She is investigating the fraudulent sale of my house." My father's confident facade cracked slightly. "This is ridiculous. We are your parents. We had every right." "No," I said firmly, "you did not. And there is something else you should know about that house." I nodded to Mr. Harrison, who stepped forward. "I am Theodore Harrison, attorney at law," he introduced himself. "I represented Margaret Collins, Cassie's grandmother, and I am the administrator of her trust." My father's expression shifted from anger to confusion. "What trust? What does this have to do with my mother?" Mr. Harrison continued, his voice measured and professional. "The house was not owned directly by Cassie. It was purchased through a trust established by Mrs. Collins before her death. Cassie is the trustee and primary beneficiary of that trust." I watched understanding slowly dawn on my father's face. Julian looked confused, looking between our father and Mr. Harrison. "What does that mean?" Julian asked. "It means I explained that the house was never mine to sell. It belongs to Grandma's trust. And more importantly, Grandma included a specific provision in her trust regarding family members who might try to take advantage." Mr. Harrison removed several documents from his briefcase. "The Margaret Collins Trust explicitly states that any family member who attempts to misappropriate, convert, or otherwise interfere with trust assets immediately and irrevocably forfeits all rights to any distribution from the trust." My mother gasped. "What does that mean, Robert?" she asked my father. Mr. Harrison answered before my father could respond. "It means that by fraudulently selling trust property, you, your husband, and your son have forfeited all inheritance rights under the trust. This includes the scheduled distribution that would have occurred on Cassie's 35th birthday." "What distribution?" my father demanded. What are you talking about? Your mother was a shrewd investor, Mr. Thompson Harrison explained. The house represented only a portion of the trust assets. There were additional funds to be distributed to family members, including substantial amounts designated for you and your son, provided you respected the terms of the trust. The color drained from my father's face. How much, he asked hoarsely. $250,000 each, Harrison replied. Plus the continued use of the vacation cabin in Bend, which is also part of the trust, all of which you have now forfeited. Julian jumped to his feet. This is not fair. We did not know about any trust. Ignorance of the trust does not excuse fraud, Mr. Thompson Harrison responded calmly. The illegal sale of trust property and forgery of the trustee's signature are still criminal acts. My relatives were watching the scene unfold with expressions ranging from shock to dismay. My Aunt Elaine had her hand over her mouth. Uncle Samuel was shaking his head in disbelief. You cannot do this, my father said, his voice no longer confident but pleading. She is my mother. That money should have come to me directly in the first place. Your mother disagreed, Harrison replied simply. And she had her reasons, which these events have unfortunately validated. My mother turned on my father, her voice trembling. You said this would be simple. You said there would be no consequences. Now we have lost everything. Julian rounded on them both. This is your fault. You said she would never find out. You said the house was legally hers to sell. Watching them turn on each other, I felt no satisfaction, only a profound sadness. This was my family. The people who should have protected and supported me now, revealed in their true nature. Detective Ramirez stepped forward. Mr. and Mrs. Thompson. Julian Thompson, I need you to come to the station to provide statements regarding the fraudulent sale and forgery charges. Are we being arrested? My mother asked, panic in her voice. Not at this time, Detective Ramirez responded. But this is a serious criminal matter that will require formal investigation. My father made one last desperate attempt. Cassie, you cannot do this to your family. We raised you. We put a roof over your head. You owe us. The room fell silent, all eyes turning to me for my response. I took a deep breath, steadying myself before speaking. I owed you respect, and I gave it even when you showed none for me. I owed you gratitude for the basic parental duties you fulfilled, and I gave that too. But I never owed you my house, my financial security, or my future. And I certainly never owed you the right to commit crimes in my name. I turned to address our extended family. I did not bring you all here for sympathy or to take sides. I brought you here as witnesses to the truth, so there can be no misrepresentation of what happened. This was not a misunderstanding or a family disagreement. It was fraud, forgery, and theft. My Aunt Elaine spoke up, her voice quiet but firm. Robert, how could you do this? To your own daughter? My father had no answer. The confident, controlling man who had dismissed my achievements and justified his favoritism for decades now, stood silent, his deception exposed. As Detective Ramirez escorted my parents and Julian toward the door, my cousin Patricia approached me. Cassie, I am so sorry. We all saw how they treated you growing up, but none of us said anything. We should have. One by one, my relatives came to express similar sentiments, years of silent observation, finally giving way to acknowledgement. It was not enough to erase the past, but it was something, a recognition that what had happened to me was not right. When everyone had gone except Emma, David, and Mr. Harrison, I finally allowed myself to feel the full weight of the evening. It is really over, isn't it? I asked, more to myself than anyone else. The legal process is just beginning, Mr. Harrison cautioned. But yes, in many ways, this chapter is closing. Your grandmother would be proud of how you handled yourself tonight. As we left the restaurant, I looked up at the night sky, feeling both lighter and heavier at the same time. The burden of pretense had been lifted, but the reality of what my family had done and who they truly were settled in its place. It was a painful truth, but truth nonetheless. And truth, however difficult, was the foundation on which I would rebuild. The weeks following the confrontation were a whirlwind of legal proceedings, emotional processing, and practical challenges. Detective Ramirez moved quickly with the fraud and forgery investigation, building a case that the district attorney deemed exceptionally strong due to the video evidence and clear documentation. My father initially hired an expensive criminal defense attorney, using the remaining funds from the house sale. His defense strategy crumbled when the attorney reviewed the evidence and advised him to seek a plea deal. The forged documents, video footage, and statements from the real estate agent and buyers left little room for denial. 3 weeks after our confrontation dinner, my father accepted a plea agreement. He would serve 2 years of probation for fraud and forgery, pay substantial restitution, and perform 500 hours of community service. My mother, who had physically forged the signatures, received similar terms with slightly less community service. Julian, while not directly involved in the forgery, was charged as an accessory and with receiving stolen property. He received 1 year of probation and was ordered to repay the entire cost of his Maldives vacation. The legal process to reclaim my house moved in parallel. Mr. Harrison worked tirelessly with the title company and the Millers to unwind the fraudulent sale. The Millers, though disappointed, were understanding and cooperative once they realized they had unknowingly participated in a fraud. They were fully compensated for their expenses, including the renovations they had begun and the costs of finding a new home. 4 months after returning from Singapore, I finally regained legal possession of my house. Walking through the front door for the first time since the betrayal, I was struck by how different it felt. The physical space was largely unchanged, but the emotional landscape had been permanently altered. This house, once my sanctuary, now carried the weight of my family's betrayal. The financial consequences for my parents and Julian were severe and immediate. The restitution payments consumed their savings, and the legal fees depleted what remained from the house sale. My parents were forced to put their own home on the market, downsizing to a small apartment in a less desirable neighborhood. Julian's collapse was perhaps the most dramatic. Ordered to repay $70,000, he found himself facing a reality he had never prepared for. His credit cards were maxed out. His sporadic employment history made finding a decent job difficult. He was forced to sell his designer clothes, electronics, and finally his car. When even these measures proved insufficient, he took a job at a local car wash, working long hours for minimum wage plus tips. The irony of him washing luxury vehicles similar to the one he once owned was not lost on anyone, least of all Julian himself. 6 months after the confrontation, I received a series of text messages from my mother. She began with apologies describing their remorse and the hardships they were facing. "We never meant to hurt you," she wrote. "We just thought you would understand it was for family." I did not respond. A week later, another message arrived, this one asking if we could meet to discuss restoring their inheritance rights. The true motivation behind her apology became clear. It was about money, not reconciliation. My father's messages came next, alternating between attempts at justification and expressions of hardship. "You have no idea how difficult this has been for us," he wrote. "Julian is suffering. Is that what you wanted?" I forwarded these messages to Mr. Harrison, who advised me not to engage. "Their inheritance rights are irrevocably terminated under the trust terms," he explained. "No negotiation or reconciliation can change that. They are attempting emotional manipulation to recover financial losses." Our extended family's reaction to the scandal evolved over time. Initially, there was shock and confusion, with some relatives attempting to mediate or encourage forgiveness. As the full extent of the deception became clear, attitudes shifted. My parents and Julian found themselves increasingly isolated at family gatherings. Their narrative of being victims of my overreaction gained no traction when faced with the evidence of their actions. My Aunt Elaine, who had witnessed my father's entitled behavior since childhood, confided in me that this incident had confirmed patterns she had observed for decades. "Your father always believed he deserved more than he earned," she told me. And Julian learned that same lesson too well. The collapse of my family's standing extended beyond financial and legal consequences. Their reputation in our community, built on my father's carefully cultivated image as a successful business consultant and family man, crumbled as news of the fraud spread. Former friends became distant. Invitations dwindled. My father's consulting clients, uncomfortable with his criminal conviction, quietly took their business elsewhere. Julian, once the golden child who could do no wrong, found himself ostracized by former friends who had enjoyed his generosity when he was flush with stolen cash. His social media accounts, once showcasing his luxury vacation, now sat dormant as he worked long hours to make minimum payments on his restitution debt. Throughout this period, I experienced complex and often contradictory emotions. There was vindication in seeing justice served, but also deep grief for the family relationships that had been irrevocably damaged, or perhaps more accurately, finally revealed for what they truly were. I felt anger alongside relief, sorrow alongside freedom. Emma and David remained steadfast supports, providing emotional stability when the legal and practical challenges became overwhelming. Emma invited me to stay with her until I felt ready to return to my house. David kept me informed about family matters without pressure to reconnect with my parents or Julian. 8 months after the confrontation, I began working with a therapist specializing in family trauma. Dr. Melissa Torres helped me navigate the conflicting emotions and begin the process of redefining my understanding of family. What you are experiencing is a form of complicated grief, she explained during one session. You are mourning the loss of the family you deserve to have, while processing the betrayal of the family you actually had. This framework helped me understand my seemingly contradictory reactions, the anger that would suddenly surface during mundane activities, the unexpected tears while doing something as simple as grocery shopping, the relief that sometimes felt like guilt. When I finally felt ready to move back into my house nearly a year after the confrontation, I approached it as a reclamation project. I repainted every room, replaced the flooring in areas my family had walked most frequently, and redesigned the garden with new plants that had no association with the past. Emma helped me sage the house, a ritual cleansing she insisted would remove negative energy. While I was skeptical of the metaphysical aspects, the symbolic act of purification resonated deeply. Room by room, we moved through the house, declaring it reclaimed and renewed. As the physical transformation progressed, I felt an internal shift as well. The house was becoming mine again, not just legally, but emotionally. The shadows of betrayal began to recede, not disappearing entirely, but diminishing in their power to disturb my peace. One afternoon, as I planted new rose bushes in memory of my grandmother, I realized something profound. The greatest theft my family had attempted was not of the house itself, but of my sense of worth. By treating my years of hard work as something they could casually appropriate, they had attempted to reinforce a lifetime of messages that my achievements were less valuable than Julian's needs. In refusing to accept their actions and fighting for justice rather than surrendering to their narrative, I had reclaimed more than property. I had asserted my inherent value and right to be treated with respect. My grandmother would have seen this as the true victory, more important than any financial or legal outcome. As the second year after the betrayal began, my parents made one final attempt at contact. Julian had moved to another state for a fresh start, and they were considering following him. "We are still your parents," my mother wrote. "Family should forgive." After careful consideration and discussion with Dr. Torres, I composed a brief response, the only communication I had initiated since the confrontation. "I do not wish you ill. I hope you find peace and growth in your new location. However, I have learned that true family respects boundaries and treats loved ones with dignity. When those fundamental elements are violated, forgiveness may be possible, but restoration of trust requires more than words. It requires transformed character demonstrated over time. Until or unless that occurs, I will be continuing my life separately from yours." I did not expect a meaningful response, and none came. Just accusations of being unforgiving and reminders of all they had supposedly done for me over the years. It confirmed that my decision to maintain distance was the right one for my well-being. My house, once a symbol of achievement, then a site of betrayal, had transformed again. It was now a testament to resilience, a physical reminder that what others attempt to take from us does not define our worth or our future. Like the new garden blooming where the old one had been, something beautiful could grow from even the most painful disruption. 2 years after that fateful day when I returned from Singapore to find my house stolen, my life had transformed in ways I could never have anticipated. The painful journey had led to unexpected growth and profound revelations about the nature of family trust and personal strength. My career had flourished following the successful Singapore presentations. The clients I secured during that trip became long-term partnerships that elevated my standing in the company. 6 months after the confrontation with my family, I was promoted to Senior Director of International Marketing with a substantial salary increase and greater creative control over campaigns. Professional success was satisfying, but the more meaningful transformations occurred in my personal life. I had cultivated a circle of friends who demonstrated what genuine support looked like. Emma remained my closest confidant, the sister in all ways that mattered. David kept in touch our shared family history, creating a bond that transcended the fractures elsewhere in our family tree. I had also formed new friendships through a support group for adults dealing with family estrangement. These individuals understood the complex grief and liberation that came with establishing boundaries with toxic family members. We celebrated holidays together, creating new traditions to replace those lost to necessary distance. My relationship with my parents and Julian remained severed. Occasionally, news would reach me through David or other relatives. My parents had indeed followed Julian to Arizona, where he had found work in resort management, ironically serving clients similar to the one he had briefly been during his stolen vacation. They lived in adjacent apartment complexes, their financial circumstances still constrained by the consequences of their actions. Sometimes in quiet moments I felt twinges of sadness for what might have been if they had been capable of genuine love and respect. But these moments grew less frequent as I built a life filled with people who valued me for who I was, not what I could provide. The house itself had undergone a complete transformation. Beyond the physical renovations, it had become a gathering place for my chosen family. Monthly dinner parties filled the dining room with laughter and conversation. The garden, now lush with plants selected for their resilience and beauty, hosted summer barbecues and autumn harvest celebrations. In the study that had once been invaded and violated, I established a small foundation named after my grandmother. The Margaret Collins Trust for Young Achievers provided scholarships and mentoring for young people who, like me, were building futures without family support. Using a portion of the trust funds that would have gone to my parents and Julian, we helped 10 students annually with college expenses and professional development. Through this foundation, I met Michael, a financial advisor, who volunteered his expertise to help scholarship recipients establish sound money management practices. Our professional relationship evolved into friendship, then something deeper. Unlike previous relationships where I had hidden parts of my family history out of shame, I shared my full story with Michael early on. "Your grandmother was a wise woman," he observed after hearing about the trust and its provisions. "She saw what was coming and made sure you would be protected." Michael understood boundaries and respect in a way that made me feel safe. He had his own complicated family history and recognized the courage it took to prioritize emotional health over traditional family obligations. Our relationship developed slowly, deliberately built on a foundation of mutual respect and genuine care. As the second anniversary of the confrontation approached, I found myself reflecting on the journey with greater clarity than ever before. The pain had not disappeared entirely, but it had transformed into wisdom. The betrayal had revealed truths that, while difficult to accept, had ultimately set me free from patterns of emotional manipulation and conditional love. Sitting in my garden on a warm summer evening, watching fireflies illuminate the twilight, I opened my grandmother's journal, a treasure I had discovered among her papers while working with Mr. Harrison on trust matters. Her entry from 30 years earlier seemed written for this moment. Love should never require the diminishment of self. True family lifts you higher, sees your light, and helps it shine brighter. Those who would dim your light to make theirs seem more special are not acting from love regardless of what they claim. Remember, Cassie, you always have the right to step away from shadows and into sunshine. Those words captured the most profound lesson of my journey. Family was not defined by blood or legal ties, but by consistent actions that demonstrated respect, support, and genuine care. The people who had proven themselves to be my true family were those who celebrated my successes without jealousy, supported me through challenges without judgment, and loved me without conditions or expectations of unearned benefits. I had learned to identify the difference between obligation and genuine connection, between manipulation disguised as love and authentic care that expected nothing in return. This discernment had allowed me to create boundaries that protected my well-being while opening my heart to relationships that nurtured rather than depleted me. Perhaps most importantly, I had discovered that resilience was not about pretending harm never occurred, but about acknowledging wounds while refusing to be defined by them. My parents and Julian had attempted to reduce me to a resource they could exploit. By rejecting that definition and reclaiming my narrative, I had affirmed my inherent worth independent of what I could provide to others. As I closed my grandmother's journal, I felt her presence as clearly as if she sat beside me on the garden bench. She had prepared me for this journey in ways I was only now fully understanding. Her legacy was not just financial security, but the wisdom to recognize true family and the courage to create it where it did not naturally exist. The house that had been the center of such betrayal had become a sanctuary again. Not because the painful events had been erased, but because they had been integrated into a larger story of growth and transformation. Every room now held new memories that outweighed the old ones. Every space had been reclaimed through deliberate acts of creation and connection. Sometimes family is not who we are born to, but who we choose to become through our own actions and the relationships we nurture. Sometimes the greatest gift in betrayal is the clarity it brings, revealing what was true all along beneath polite fictions and expected roles. Sometimes the most profound healing comes not from forgetting pain, but from using it as a foundation to build something beautiful and authentic. As the sun set on another day in my reclaimed life, I felt gratitude, not despite the difficult journey, but because of it. The house my family had tried to steal had become more truly mine than ever before. The life they had attempted to diminish had expanded beyond what I could have imagined. The strength they had underestimated had become my greatest asset, just as my grandmother had predicted all those years ago. Have you ever had to set boundaries with family members who crossed lines? How did you handle the difficult balance between family obligation and self-respect? I would love to hear your stories and perspectives in the comments below. And if this story resonated with you, please consider subscribing and sharing it with someone who might need to hear that standing up for yourself is not selfish but necessary. Thank you for listening to my journey, and remember that sometimes the family we create through choice is more nurturing than the one we are given by chance. Wishing you all the strength to recognize your worth and the courage to protect it.